The man hobbles along carrying a rucksack and what appears to be a water jug. At a glance, he might seem like any other Russian soldier marching to his inevitable death in Ukraine, but take a closer look and you see the wrinkles on his face, the struggle in his steps. This is not an elite soldier. It's an old man who Russian President Vladimir Putin is sending to die for his invasion. And that's the story of Russia's military today. The country has started sending grandpas to the front lines as it's running out of soldiers, meaning Putin is happy to exploit the most vulnerable in Russian society to get what he wants. In truth, Putin has been setting all of this up for a while. As his war burned through the younger recruits and contract soldiers with which he started his invasion, Russia's president has increasingly turned his attention toward older soldiers to keep his manpower numbers high. Hints of this strategy first appeared in July 2023. However, Putin wasn't focusing on the elderly just yet. In that month, The Guardian reports, Russia raised the maximum age at which its men can be conscripted into the military from 27 to 30. The move was enshrined in law, along with a clause that bans any conscript from leaving Russia once they've received their conscription notice from a Russian enlistment office. A small step, perhaps, but one that provided a hint about a problem running deep within Russia's military. The country was running out of younger men Putin hoped to use to take Ukraine. With his pool of potential conscripts drying up, Putin raised the conscription age limit so he could send more people to the front lines. It only gets worse from there. Hidden away in the bill that extended the conscription age limit to 30 was another law. Russia extended the age at which reserves could be mobilized to serve in his army, raising that maximum from the previous 65 to 70. The message being sent was loud and clear. There is no escape from Russia's army for a former service member. Retirement is no longer an option. Putin could call you at any time, and you'll have to ship yourself to Ukraine to fight in his war. Specifically, Reuters reported at the time, the new law meant that Russian soldiers who'd achieved the highest ranks in the country's military would be eligible to be drafted back into service up to the age of 70. That's some reward for a lifetime of distinguished service. For other senior ranks, the age limit was raised to 65. Junior officers also didn't escape the age increases, with Russia permitting itself to bring those people back up to the age of 60. As for the rank and file, the age limit rose from 45 to 55, allowing Putin to squeeze another 10 years of juice out of his fighters on the front lines. This graded approach also raises another possibility. Let's say Russia calls up a reserve at 54 to head back to the front lines. Within a year, that soldier will be heading back home, right? Not necessarily. What if Russia promotes that soldier to the rank of a junior officer during his service? That's another 5 years Putin could squeeze out of him. And if by some miracle the soldier survives to age 60, perhaps another promotion to officer lies in his future, and then to the Russian military's higher ranks. Even if one of the new waves of elderly soldiers survives, Russia has the tools to keep them in its ranks for as long as it needs. These new laws set the groundwork for a transformation of the Russian army. Depleted of the young recruits Putin used to invade Ukraine, Russia's leader focused instead on older troops. Mobilization laws were changed, contracted soldiers were accepted no matter their age, fitness levels, or suitability for fighting. By October 2024, the Moscow Times reports, the Russian military had seen a huge influx of older contract soldiers who many in Russia see as being detrimental to the country's war effort. By that point, soldiers over the age of 45 made up about half of all Russia's new recruits, the Moscow Times says. It also quoted an anonymous senior source in the Moscow mayor's office, who revealed that the average age of recruits had risen from 40 at the start of 2024 to 50 by October. And these recruits weren't the best of the best that Russia's increasingly aging population could provide. They're all sick, one Russian soldier fighting on the front lines is reported to have said. Their legs hurt, their heads hurt, and they're slow. The same outlet, reporting on a study conducted by the Russian investigative news outlet Vyostka, revealed that these older soldiers are dying in massive numbers. Vyostka says that 2,475 of Russia's volunteers aged 45 or over had died by October 2024, accounting for around half of all Russia's confirmed deaths up to that point in the year. Of course, this number is also likely lower than the real figure. The BBC even says as much, reporting in May 2025 that Russia's likely death toll for 2024 was 112,000. If that's the case and the ratio of half holds true, that means Russia's military lost 56,000 soldiers aged 45 or over in 2024. What we're seeing here is the changing face of what was supposed to be one of the world's strongest armies, and that face is growing increasingly wrinkled and haggard as Putin scrambles to find more warm bodies to send to the front. The Warthog Defense YouTube channel sums the situation up nicely. Now all the personnel are grandfathers, it says. They're being mowed down, say Russian soldiers. The same channel also quotes a Russian soldier serving in the Donetsk region who says, "Since the beginning of the summer of 2024, our regiment has lost about half its men. 200s and 300s killed and wounded near Chaziv Yar, roughly 500 people," the soldier says. "They are still sending us additional personnel. Half of those who come are over 50, or maybe even more, and not all of them reach their positions." That's the sad reality of Putin's army today. Half of his soldiers are pushing 50 or have long since broken through that age barrier. They're old, infirm, sick, and as the soldier reveals, many don't even make it to their positions before they succumb to the horrors of a war they were never supposed to face. In a March 2025 article, Ben Spencer, writing for the Red Line podcast, dug deeper into the issue. He revealed that of the 88,000 soldiers Mediazona claims Russia has lost in Ukraine, 23% of them were contract soldiers with little to no previous military experience. That's an important number because it's a substantial increase over the 14% of deaths for which these types of soldiers accounted back in November 2023. What this tells us is that Putin has increasingly relied on contract soldiers to plug the manpower gaps in his army as the Ukraine war drags on. Why? Because the younger, elite soldiers he started with are dying. Many of these contract soldiers, as we mentioned earlier, are far older than those who served Putin at the beginning of his invasion, and that's by design. These shifting recruitment targets are also being reflected in the Kremlin's propaganda campaigns, with the recruitment ads of 2025 now being aimed at an entirely different set of Russians compared to the ads aired in 2022, Spencer writes. He points to an advert doing the rounds in Russia that appears to be aimed squarely at middle-aged Russians, working in what many in the country would consider low-prestige roles. The message being delivered is clear. Escape your humdrum life by joining the military. Make your family proud and earn more money than you ever thought possible. A wonderful proposition, it seems, with the obvious caveat that most of those who end up joining won't make it back alive. The mocking tone the ad takes toward the roles in which many of these middle-aged men serve only adds to the message. This is all part of a strategy born of necessity. Putin is using his manipulative tactics against his own people. Not because he wants to, necessarily, but he has to because of the sheer number of his younger soldiers who have died in Ukraine. With adverts like these, he targets the middle-aged and even the grandpas of Russia. He mocks them, derides them for their lowly positions in life. Then he presents the fighting war in Ukraine as the solution. Men who may never have even considered going to Ukraine are tempted by the allure of massive piles of cash and what slithers of prestige Putin promises them for their war efforts. Then they die. And they do it while slowing down the rest of Russia's troops as Putin desperately tries to maintain the illusion of Russia's massive manpower advantage. Perhaps the most tragic of the individual stories to emerge from Putin's desperation is that of Yuri Bushkovsky. As reported by the Financial Times in February, Bushkovsky was born soon after the death of the infamous Soviet leader Joseph Stalin. He had survived the Cold War and seen the Soviet Union dissolve to give way to what we now know as modern Russia. He then watched as his president invaded Ukraine as part of a supposed special military operation designed to make Russia and Ukraine whole again. Clearly, something about all of this inspired Bushkovsky. At the age of 69, the grandfather who had spent much of his life working as a taxi driver found himself on the front lines. He, like many others, died just months before what would have been his 70th birthday. Bushkovsky provides a human face to the exploitation of the middle-aged and elderly that seems to have become Putin's stock in trade through 2024 and into 25. His thick white moustache and the crow's feet around his eyes tell the tale of a man who should never have been fighting in the first place, but he was, and now he's dead. Another victim of an approach to contracting soldiers that has led to the average age of those under Russian contracts being well over 40 years old, says the Financial Times. What we have here is a combination of choices made by Putin to create an aging army. His raising of Russia's conscription age was an important first step, soon followed by him raising the maximum ages for calling up reservists of all ranks to senior citizen levels. Then there's the contracting approach. Putin is actively targeting Russia's older citizens with a twisted message promising prestige in return for patriotism, leading to the creation of a military that is increasingly relying on the middle-aged and elderly to serve as cannon fodder. That's what these people really are to Putin. He's not hiring older people into his military because he believes they bring wisdom and experience to help the younger members of their units. As we mentioned earlier, many of those Russian contract soldiers who serve in Ukraine have no prior military experience, and they'll only undergo a handful of weeks of training before they're sent to the fight. No, Putin wants these so-called soldiers because his tactic in Ukraine is to overwhelm the country with his manpower advantage. And the key to overwhelming in Putin's mind is to soak up so much of Ukraine's ammunition that it eventually has nothing left with which to fight. That's the purpose of Russia's older soldiers. They're not in Ukraine to fight, they're in Ukraine to soak up bullets. But all of this leads us to two questions, both of which see us asking why. First, why has Putin been forced to rely on these older soldiers to prop up his war effort? And second, why are these soldiers so willing to fight for Putin, even though they know they're likely agreeing to be sent to their deaths? Starting with why Putin is hiring more older soldiers, we've touched on one of the reasons already: Russia's out-of-control casualty rate. Putin's forces have lost far more soldiers than anybody thought possible when he launched his full-scale invasion in February 2022. By March 2025, the country was dealing with a casualty rate of about 1,000 of its soldiers dying, being injured, or getting captured in Ukraine every day. That compares unfavorably to Ukraine, which CNN says had experienced almost 400,000 casualties by early June, between 60,000 and 100,000 of which were deaths. A few weeks later, Russia officially passed the 1 million casualty threshold, and the bodies keep on being piled onto the pyre of Putin's ambition. According to Ukraine's Ministry of Finance, Russia has lost 1,031,620 of its soldiers as of July 11th, showing that there's no slowdown since the 1 million mark was broached. What we see here are the results of Putin's attritional approach in action. Russia's leader is being forced to hire older and older soldiers because he's running out of younger people to send to the front lines. The casualty numbers tell the whole story. There are only so many people in Russia who are willing to fight for Putin's cause in the absence of a full and forced mobilization effort. Putin's at the point where he will take anybody he can get just to keep the warm bodies flowing into Ukraine. It doesn't matter to Putin that many of his older soldiers can't even carry their own backpacks. They don't need to be able to dig trenches or ditches to protect themselves. They're cannon fodder, pure and simple. As we said before, if these older soldiers die, then at least they've taken a Ukrainian bullet with them. That brings us to the second reason Putin is now focusing on older soldiers. Russia has a recruitment crisis. You wouldn't know this if you look at the headline figures, especially those coming out of Russia itself. In May, the Moscow Times reported that Putin was claiming that Russia is recruiting nearly twice the number of soldiers that Ukraine recruits. According to Russia's leader, up to 60,000 people are volunteering to join Russia's military every month in 2025, which is substantially more than the 30,000 Ukrainians being forcibly conscripted, he says. That number also conveniently suggests that Russia is more than making up for its high casualty rate. If it's losing 1,000 soldiers per day, that amounts to about 30,000 per month. Recruiting 60,000 per month means that Russia can replace every single lost soldier with 2 more, making Ukraine's task seem practically hopeless. But there's a problem. Russia's recruitment figures aren't all that they seem. At least, that's according to the New Voice of Ukraine, which reported on May 30th that Putin is likely massively inflating the numbers he's delivering to his state press. The outlet reports on a study conducted by another independent media organization, which found that federal budget expenditure reports suggest that Russia recruited between 374,200 and 407,200 contract soldiers in 2024. Even at the higher end, that amounts to 33,933 soldiers per month, which is a long way behind the 60,000 claim. The report adds that the situation hasn't gotten any better in 2025, the New Voice of Ukraine says. The figure announced by Putin, 1,800 new contract soldiers per day by summer 2025, may be nearly twice the real number, the report states. Another researcher, Yanis Kluger, also claims that his monitoring of Russian recruitment centers suggests that Russia is actually hiring about 1,000 soldiers per day, which again matches an approximate monthly number of 30,000. We also have to consider the quality of these recruits, Warthog Defense explains. Russian military recruitment centers are under constant pressure and quotas to obtain new recruits, so they are not too concerned with ensuring that the men are actually able to fight, it says. The results of legally mandated fitness tests are being ignored, as are injuries that a recruit may be carrying into battle. All of this means that more older people are being signed to contracts because Putin is happily turning a blind eye to the checks and balances that were supposed to keep them out of Russia's military. And in doing so, he's also spending a lot of money, around $22 million per day on military recruitment, says the Moscow Times. Which brings us back to the second why question we posed earlier. Why are Russia's older generations signing up to fight? The $22 million per day figure provides a hint. They're signing up because they get paid a lot of money. According to iStories, Putin raised the Russian military's one-off signing bonuses for its contract soldiers from 195,000 rubles to 400,000 rubles in 2024. That amounts to about $5,100 just for putting pen to paper on a military contract. After that, the pay keeps on streaming in. That's according to Dara Masikot, a senior fellow with the Russia and Eurasia program at the Carnegie Endowment for International Peace. Most people are actually just attracted by the money and incentives, she points out. They're offering a monthly base combat pay salary of around 200,000 rubles a month. That's like $2,000 to $3,000. Those wages are in the top 10 to 15% of Russian national salaries. So this is not chump change. This is giving a lot of people paychecks that they've not had before. We mentioned how Putin is playing on the supposed prestige of the Russian military in his propaganda. This is what that prestige means: more cash in the pockets of older soldiers who've never seen that kind of money before. And beyond the signing-on bonuses and high wages, Russia also offers compensation payouts to the families of soldiers who lose their lives in Ukraine. These payouts amounted to 6% of Russia's entire federal budget for 2024, says Business Insider, and they essentially mean that the families of those who sign contracts receive a large lump sum upon a soldier's death, along with the high wages that soldier is pulling in. Place yourself in the shoes of an older Russian gentleman for a moment. You have no desire to take part in Putin's bloody war, regardless of whether you believe it's just or not. You're too old, everything aches. All you want to do is keep going with whatever you're doing until you can retire. But then the Russian military comes along and dangles more money in front of your face than you've ever seen before. For your service, you'll earn enough to perhaps buy an apartment for your son, pay for your daughter's college education, ensure your wife can live in comfort for the rest of her days. It doesn't matter if you want to fight or not. You feel compelled to do so because an earning opportunity like this will likely never come up again. That's why so many middle-aged and elderly people are signing up for Putin's military. Russia's leader has lowered all of the guardrails that would have prevented them from doing so in the past and replaced them with the offer of bumper payouts for anybody who signs up. Many who sign their contracts know they'll never come back, but they've made their decision because they want to provide for their families' futures. It's exploitation on a grand scale. Putin is more than happy to fill his army with more grandpas to soak up bullets as he continues to hide the very real problems his military faces as it battles on in Ukraine. But soon Putin may no longer have the funds to make his contract offers to Russia's older citizens. Ukraine is trying to make sure of that with a series of strikes against the last thing keeping Russia alive, the Shadow Fleet. Find out more in our video, and remember to subscribe to The Military Show for more up-to-date coverage of the latest challenges Putin's military faces. And thank you for watching.